class. Welcome to one of our last review videos of the school year. While it is bittersweet to think that our year is almost done, I get very excited when I think back to how much you all have learned this year. And this Chapter 7 test will be one more opportunity for you to show off all the awesome skills that you have built throughout our year together. Now, with that being said, because this is one of our final tests this year, we want to make it one of our best. So I'm going to go over some of the major key ideas that you will need to know for our test tomorrow. In addition to this video, please remember you have a study guide that you were given to help you practice the question types that you will see. So let's start off from the very beginning. What is a percent? Well, we learned that the word percent means per 100. So if, let's say we have 35 people out of 100 total. Well, 35 out of 100 would be our fraction to represent that portion. And then if we wanted to turn this into a percentage, we would recognize 35 out of 100, or 35 per 100 is 35%. So in a word problem, if it's out of 100, they've already set our total equal to 100, so our part represents truly just the percentage. Now, we also talked about how to convert decimals and fractions and percentages. So let's say we had 26%, 5%, and 250%. And we wanted to turn these into decimals. Well, to turn a percentage into a decimal, you start with the decimal point at the end of the whole number, and you're going to move it 2 places to the left. It's always times 2 places. If it's already a percent and we're turning it into a decimal, then our decimal is going to the left. So this would be 0.26. For 5, I do the same thing. I start with my decimal, I move it 2 places. Now notice there's an extra gap before the 5. So when I write my decimal, I want to include that 0, so 0.05. And then 250, we start at the end of the number, move the decimal 2 places, and we get 2.5. So that's our percent turned into a decimal. But what if we have a decimal and we want to make it into a percent? For example, 0.005, 1.56, and 0.72. Now, let's say we want to turn these into percentages. So now we're going the opposite way. So we're going to go 2 places, but because we're starting as a decimal and turning it into a percent, we're going to go to the right. So this would become 2 places to the right. That equals 0.5%. 1.56. Let's move our decimal to the right 2 places, and that's 156%. And then lastly, we move our decimal 2 places to the right for 0.72, and that is 72%. All right, so that's our conversions, how we would rewrite decimals and percentages in different situations. Now, the last thing that we're going to talk about is if we are given a fraction. So let's say we have the fraction 2/5, or 7/10, or 1 1/4. When we are working with numbers like this, we can use division to turn these fractions into decimals and then into percents. So for 2 over 5, we would do 2 divided by 5, and we get 0.4. We divide the top divided by the bottom, so that's 0.4. But if we want it as a percent, we're going to move that 2 places to the right, and we get 40%. For the next one, 7 over 10. 7 divided by 10 is 0.7, if you can see that on the screen. And then we move the decimal 2 places, so we get 70%. Now the last one, 1 1/4. You can do this a couple of ways. I recognize that this is 1 and the remainder, which is represented by a fraction at the moment. So I could turn this into either 5 divided by 4, or just keep the 1 whole, and 1 divided by 4 is 2/5. Now, 1.25 is our decimal, but if we want it as a percent, we move it 2 place values. So the percent is 125%. All right, now let's use this to work out some percent problems, because that's the second half of the test. So for percent problems, we've learned 2 different ways that we can solve them. We have a percent equation, and we have a percent proportion. We've learned both, and you will need to know both on the test. Now, for the percent equation, we can turn a percent problem given to us into an equation or into a proportion. For the equation, we would do our whole times our percent equals the part. But sometimes we're given different pieces of information. So we learned keywords to recognize to translate our equations. So if we see the word of, that's when we are going to multiply. If we see the percent, that's when we need to change it into a decimal. Those are the 2 big things to remember for this. So for the example, let's say we're given 1250 is 1.25% of what number? Well, the first thing to do is to make sure we set up our equation correctly. So I'm going to rewrite this. 1250 is my first number, so I'm going to start with that. Is my keyword, that means equals 1.25%. Now, for now, I'm going to write it as a percent, but I know eventually I'm going to need to turn it into a decimal to work out my answer. So 1.25% of is multiply. What number is x? So now from here, we have to make sure, don't forget the decimal part. So this becomes 1250 equals what, oops, I moved my decimal to in the wrong direction. So right now it's a percent. We want to turn it into a decimal by moving it 2 places to the left. So this would become 0.0125 x. Then we'll divide by our decimal, and 1250 divided by 0.0125 is 100,000. So our answer would be 100,000. Now, let's say they asked us to solve a similar problem, but we want a percent proportion. The things to know about our percent proportion is that we set it up as part over whole equals percent over 100. Now, this side is always the same. The percent number might change, but 100 will always be the denominator. So if they give us the question, 124.2 is what percent of 540? So we'll set up our percent proportion. So in this case, 124.2 is, so that's the part, 124.2 is what percent? So that means the percent is what we're missing. And then of tells me what number goes on the denominator, so that would be 540. From here, we will cross multiply. So if I cross multiply this, I get 12420 equals 540%. Now the percent might confuse me. So instead of the percent sign, because the percent is what we're looking for, we're going to do 540 times x. So that's this diagonal. Now we divide by 540. And if we do 12,420 divided by 540, we get 23 equals x. Now the beauty of the proportion is we don't have to worry about moving decimals. So our answer is just 23%. All right, guys. So remember to visit the Math Center if you have more questions than that, but that should give you at least a good starting point. And then your study guide and the rest of your study efforts will help really bring it all home so tomorrow we rock that test. Good luck studying and have a great day. Bye.